Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another wonderful tasting with the Virtual Tasting Society. I'm Vadim Perlovsky, and today I'm excited to welcome a brand we have yet to taste. This is our first time tasting Tequila Ocho. We know whiskey well, but we're learning more about agave spirits. So tasting a well-regarded, no additives, no bullshit tequila is definitely at the top of our list. So it's one of the few brands that I've been seeking out, and I'm super excited to welcome Chris Simmons, the national brand ambassador for Tequila Ocho, to tell us all about the brand and walk us through this fantastic 6-bottle lineup that we have. And welcome to the group. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you for that introduction. Let me first ask, how much time do we have?
As much as you want.
Wonderful. All right. If anyone needs to drop off at some point, please just let me know. But I'd like to share a few stories and get into a little bit of the history of the brand and share some kind of anecdotal stories of who we are as a brand, and then we'll get into the tasting here in a little while. So my name is Chris Simmons. I live down here in San Diego. Sorry, I was a little bit late. The traffic was tough getting home from a training I had downtown. I am the national ambassador of Tequila Ocho and Mezcal Vago. So I work for a company called Sampson and Surrey, and we are suppliers / importers. So we have a few different brands in our portfolio, 6 in total. 2 of them are agave based, and I am the national agave spirit specialist for the company. I worked for a very long time in the restaurant business and put together a pretty fun lineup through my career of some great agave pairing dinners. So I became very close with a lot of different master distillers from Mexico, brought them up to San Diego, and we did some pretty cool events throughout the years, paired with some local chefs, especially some chefs from the Baja area. If any of you are from Southern California, I would imagine a lot of you are here. You'll know that there's some really great chefs down in the Baja area. So did a lot of great dinners, and through the years of working in restaurants and doing these dinners and putting a consulting group together, or a company called Sipping Life, where we take people on tours, we do education and whatnot. I became very close with a lot of the master distillers and brand owners down in Mexico. One of the people that I was closest with through all those years and experiences was a guy named Tomas Estes. Some of you may be familiar with Tomas. Tomas is one of the co-founders of Tequila Ocho. So Ocho is owned or was founded, I should say, by Tomas and Carlos Camarena. Carlos is one of the most famous distillers in Mexico. He has been around for his entire career in this business. He's actually a 5th-generation farmer and a 3rd-generation distiller. And what that means, it's important to know these things about Carlos, because we'll get into this later on, but one of the things that separates Ocho from other brands is that we're a single estate tequila. We'll talk about that down the line. But I really want to drive home, before we get into tasting, the understanding of who started this brand, because that is really at the base of understanding where the philosophy for the brand came from. So Tomas, who here has heard of Tomas or knows of Tomas, just by a show of hands? Just a couple of you. Okay, so if you were to Google Tomas Estes and the New York Times, you would see him as a full-page spread and an obituary in the New York Times. Tomas was that well known in the agave world that he garnered an obituary essentially in the New York Times. So he was born in East LA. Another show of hands here. We're going to be interactive right from the beginning. Of all of you on the screen in front of me, how many of you are living in the LA area? So almost everybody. It looks like maybe CJ and Eric are not. Is that my only people that aren't? Where are you guys from? Where are you living?
Orange County.
Orange County. All right.
Kansas City.
Eric, does that put you on the San Diego Padres side of things? Or are you an Angels fan or a?
No, Dodgers, bro.
Oh, All right. Well, good thing that Vadim charged you twice for this tasting tonight.
Uh,
Just kidding. CJ?
Kansas City.
Kansas City, Missouri. All right. I love it.
Go
Everybody
Chiefs.
else from LA? Yeah, go Chiefs. Ugh, I'm a Patriots fan. That's tough for me. Everybody else on the board is from LA, essentially, or living in LA? All right, cool. So here's what I'll say. For those of you that are from LA, you've got a lot in common with this brand already because Tomas was born and raised in East LA. And this goes back a number of years. He was born in the 40s. And then going into the 70s after school, he actually moved to Amsterdam and started opening up Mexican restaurants. And as you can imagine, in the 70s in Europe, there were not a lot of Mexican restaurants, throughout Europe. So it was kind of uncharted territory. It was tough to get certain ingredients, but it was definitely new territory for tequila. Tomas, having multiple Mexican restaurants throughout the continent, is importing a lot of tequila, and it starts to kind of take a bit of a foothold throughout Europe. Fast forward a couple decades, and there are a lot of Mexicans that are extremely happy with all the work that Tomas has essentially laid, all this groundwork that he has laid in Europe. So he was bestowed the honor as the European ambassador of tequila by the Tequila Chamber, and this was a really fantastic, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? It was a very, very important honor for him. He ends up writing a book called The Tequila Ambassador, a very beautiful book, a light blue cover. At the time that I met him, the book was out of print. You could find it online on the aftermarket for $10,000. This book, pretty wild. It has since gone back into recirculation, as you can imagine. Some publishers realized there was some money to be made and started to reprint it. But if you ever get a chance, check out The Tequila Ambassador. It's a beautiful, amazing book. Tomas passed a couple years ago. And it was a devastating blow for the tequila world, but he was 75 and he'd had a really great run. Tomas and I became very close when I was the general manager of a restaurant, and I'd asked him if I could essentially do a project involving Tequila Ocho. And I won't bore you with that story, but long story short, he gave me the blessing to do the project. He ended up coming to the restaurant. I met him, and we became very close. For the next several years, we would take trips down to Mexico together. He would bring people from Europe. He was living in the UK at the time. He would bring people from Europe. He would meet me in San Diego. Once he got sick, he would come and do some of his treatments here in San Diego at a local hospital. He'd come to my house and spend time with my family. I would go up to his house and spend time. He'd moved to the United States at that point, so he was living in Oregon. My wife would go to see her mother in Eugene, and I had a good excuse to not go to Eugene, and I would go to Ashland instead and see Tomas and spend time with him there. At any rate, we became very close, and it was like losing a son, or I'm sorry, not a son, like a father, a best friend, and a brother is what I used to say. That's what Tomas meant to me. So when we lost him, I was devastated. So going back, reversing about 15, 20 years. So he's in Europe. Carlos Camarena is making El Tesoro de Don Felipe, Tapatio, at the time, some other brands. He goes over to Europe, he meets Tomas, and he approaches Tomas. He says, "Hey, what do you think about starting a brand with me?" And Tomas says, "Man, you're Carlos. You're one of the most famous distillers in all of Mexico. You want to start a brand with me?" And Carlos says, "Well, you're Tomas. You're the European ambassador of tequila. You have access to the entire continent. I would love to start a brand with you." So they say, "Let's do it." And a bromance starts. So they go back to around us at one point. The distillery where Carlos was making his tequila was called La Alteña. So they sit down and they say, "Okay, well, we're going to have a bunch of tequila put in front of us, and we're going to do a blind tasting. And we're going to determine which of all of these samples in front of us is the origin of the brand that we'll create." So they have a bunch of tequila put out in front of them, and they're each tasting them individually, writing notes, determining which they like the best. They get through the tasting, and then they come together and they say, Carlos asked Tomas, said, "Okay, which was your favorite?" And Tomas says, "Well, it was the eighth sample." And Carlos looks at him and he says, the eighth sample is my favorite as well. And so as they try to determine what the name of their brand would be, it simply came down to the eighth sample and Tequila Ocho. That's where the idea or the name of Tequila Ocho came from, literally from the samples. So now we fast forward to the idea of how the brand is going to be developed. So throughout Tomas's time living in Europe, opening up multiple restaurants, he would go to France every year with his brother. His brother had also become an expat, is living in Europe, and they would meet up in France and go to Burgundy. Every single year, the brothers would meet up, they'd go to Burgundy and drink wine. Because of Tomas's stature, he'd become a bit of a celebrity in Europe at this point. He was, he would have famous rock stars in his restaurants. He became, I guess he had great connections, and he would go to some of the best, vineyards in Burgundy and taste really great wine. So when he and Carlos were talking about what kind of brand they wanted to create, Tomas said, well, what if we brought in the concept of terroir?
Did we lose him? That was abrupt.
I think so.
Yeah, I think
He's
he's
just gone.
had a couple of little dropouts there. It looks like maybe his connection flipped out on him.
Mm.
What do you guess for living in San Diego?
The magic word was terroir.
Mm.
I was gonna say, and I was like, right at the good part.
Eric, what did you do? He was just kidding.
I say, those Padre fans, man, they can't win nothing.
Padres and Patriots fans. I mean, come on.
Exactly, double whammy.
Hey, jeez. My son's a Patriots fan. I can barely leave, stay with him in the house.
Oh, I wouldn't.
All right.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It's not internet. His computer just restarted.
Oh no.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he had those little moments. I was like, I bet you his computer shut down.
It did look a little glitchy.
Didn't plug it in.
Probably had those updates. Don't you love it when a computer says, I'm going to force you to have these updates now, whether you like it or not?
What are you sipping on, Vadim?
A little tequila ocho. This is a blanco.
Oh, that's the leftover bottles from the samples, because that looks more than a sample size.
Mm. So this glass is from the same event you probably got this glass from.
Oh yeah, I got those hanging up. I brought out this instead, but I should run over and back to the main house and pick those up, because those were really cool.
I realized when I got home they're Riedel glasses. I should have kept some. I just have the one. I wish I had 4. Mm. Oh, let me pause the recording.
I didn't.
All right. So as they're trying to determine what kind of like what the DNA of the brand is going to be, Tomas asked Carlos, hey, what do you think about the concept of terroir? Like, first of all, will it work? By a show of hands, does everybody understand terroir? Are you familiar with that term? Anybody here that's not familiar with it? So I can skip over the explanation of terroir. Okay, sorry. Michael's girlfriend, wife, friend, lover, acquaintance. Yes, all the above.
That's actually Michael.
Terroir is okay.
We don't
terroir is essentially all the growing conditions behind a grapevine that we would normally talk about it in the sense of wine, right? So, for example, take Pinot Noir. If we have a Pinot Noir wine comes from a Pinot Noir grape. There's specific types of grapes that make all the wine, right? So a Pinot Noir grape specifically, take a Pinot Noir that comes from Willamette, Oregon, or Sonoma, California, or Burgundy, France. They're all Pinot Noir grapes making Pinot Noir wine, but they all taste drastically different. Why is that? Well, in a word, terroir. right? So all of the growing conditions around that grapevine. So what kind of soil is the vine in? What type of rain is it receiving? Is it on an eastern facing slope or is it on a western facing slope? Is it receiving, fog coming in the morning or not? All those things make up terroir. The same thing exists in the agave world, right? So what is the soil like where that agave is being grown, right? I heard you talking about mezcal when I hop back on here. If we are, talking about an espadín, espadín is the most common, varietal of agave being used for mezcal. Why do they taste so drastically different if it's the same plant? Depends on where it's being raised, what's in the soil, all of those things. So all the terroir. So Thomas was very used to the concept of terroir because of all of his time in Burgundy, France. So he asked Carlos, well, would terroir exist in the world of tequila? And Carlos says, yeah, absolutely, it would exist, but we have a problem. And Tomas says, okay, well, what would the problem be? And Carlos says, well, the tequila is going to be different every single year. Every batch, it's going to be different. And Tomas says, that's perfect. Let's go for it. We want it to be different. We want to show some variation. So that leads us into how Ocho really became to be what it is today as the single estate tequila. So when we look at a bottle and we understand what single estate means, essentially single estate on the label is kind of taking a page out of that single vineyard concept of wine. We have right now 37 different fields that we harvest agave from. That number kind of fluctuates from time to time, but for the most part, we have around 37 different fields. So if you look at a bottle of Tequila Ocho, you'll see the name of the field on the label and the vintage or the year that we harvested that agave. That's very important because we're very focused on terroir and where that specific agave is coming from and the flavor of that agave compared to other fields. So that leads us into our first tasting. So let's go ahead and taste, and then we'll talk a little bit more, and we'll kind of bounce back and forth between storytelling and tasting, so you're not just listening to me the whole time. We'll have some fun here while we do it.
Yeah, Chris,
So
do you want to tell us a tasting order so we can line them up?
Yeah, that's a great call. So I've got them in front of me here. If you have tasting, I don't know how you all work. If you have something to put on top of your glass, I call them aroma savers. They're just little pieces of paper. If you don't have them, no big deal. But I've got the tasting going from the Ocho Plata to Repo, Añejo, and Extra Añejo. So the regular order first. And then the number 5 and number 6 will be the Ocho Repo Widow Jane and Widow Jane and Añejo. We'll save those for the end. And we could have this tasting go in a few different ways. We could stack the repos all together. I want to put those at the end, mostly because they're higher proof. And you're all professional tasters. You understand what happens when you taste. If we were to kind of dunk those higher proofs in earlier, it would impact our experience with the añejo and the extra añejo. So we'll set those at the end. My recommendation is to maybe save a little bit of your repo as that second pour, so we can taste that side by side. But I want to taste them all in the traditional order first, and then we'll have the Widow Janes at the end. So first plata, or the first tasting is going to be our plata, which is the Potrero Grande 2023. So we released 5 different platas in 2023. This being one of the popular releases. We have another one called San Geronimo, which will be at the repo level. We'll have that field. We'll talk more about that field as we get there. But let's go ahead and go through here this tasting. So I'm also a certified catador in addition to being my national ambassador role. I've had this title for a number of years. I earned it with the tequila tasters of Guadalajara. Francisco Genal was the founder of this certification program. Essentially, a catador is like a sommelier, but for tequila. A cata in Spanish would be a tasting. So a catador is someone who takes people through a tasting. So we'll actually go through how we would taste a tequila in an official cata if we were in one of my sessions. So the first thing that we'll do is look at color, and this will be important as we progress through the line here. So hopefully in a room with some pretty good light, looks like most of you are. Obviously, with this plata, there isn't going to be any color, so we'll skip over that. Next, we're going to go ahead and we're going to swirl the glass, swirl the liquid in the glass as if you were tasting wine, and then we'll look at where that meniscus line is on the side of the glass. What we want to do here is we're looking for viscosity, right? So tears and legs. Tears are going to roll down very slowly. Legs are going to go down quickly. Essentially, we're looking for the viscosity, but we're looking for surface tension here. The thicker the liquid, the slower it's going to roll down the side of the glass because it's really gripping the side of the glass. The thinner the liquid, the quicker it's going to roll down. This isn't necessarily a sign of quality or not. It will just give us an indication of what we can anticipate once we put it on our palate. So I know that it'll be kind of hard to hear everybody, so I'll just take a quick little poll. Who here by show of hands thinks that the viscosity is low on this? So we've got some legs, but very few tears. By show of hands, low viscosity? Okay. See one. How about medium viscosity? Anybody think that we're getting kind of a mix of tears and legs? All right. And anybody thinking that you're seeing basically high viscosity here, mostly tears with maybe a couple of legs here and there? Yeah, that's what I would say. I would say that your viscosity here is at least medium plus, if not kind of pushing into high. Some of that will have to do with what glass you're drinking out of. Some of that will have to do if you've already been drinking on this. In other words, once you start to drink, you're essentially lubricating the side of that glass. That will impact what happens to it, after that point. But from a fresh glass perspective, I can tell you that you'll see a couple legs here and there, but for the most part, the tears are pretty slow to form. So we can anticipate what will happen with the next step. Well, not the next step, the second to next step. The next step is going to be smelling, right? So I would like you to go ahead and smell this. And then let's get interactive here. I think this will be important for us to kind of chat as a group. So go ahead and unmute your microphones and feel free to just kind of speak freely with what you're smelling here. Remember that throughout this exercise, throughout the rest of the night, and I'm sure you've all heard this before, there's no right or wrong answer, right? No matter what you're experiencing, it's right. So what do we get on the nose on this plata?
Grass and salt.
I love that. So some green component in the form of grass and some salinity. I love it. What else?
It's a little buttery, I think.
Buttery. Yeah, I love it. Great. And a
I
lot
got
of
some,
times that buttery component. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was gonna say I got some mild like green pepper minerality and some florals.
Absolutely. What kind of florals?
Got me there, man. I can never identify them. Just like a inherent florality. Same with bourbon, which I usually drink. I can smell the florals in the bourbon and the rye, but I can never identify them.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love the minerality component. For me, that's a really big factor in a lot of tequila ocho specifically, and you'll see it in throughout tequila in general, especially high quality tequila. For me, I like to distinguish minerality in terms of what kind of stone, and I will oftentimes put these types of stone in two different camps, right? It'll either be granite or like a white stone. That's kind of one camp, or it'll be a sandstone, more of like a brown kind of like sense of a brown rock, right? It's just kind of how the way that my mind associates minerality. To go back to that butter component, I think that's a really great term to use because yeast is such a very important part of any spirit, right? And when we're talking about yeast, we're talking about fermentation. Fermentation creates flavors of yeast, like a bread kind of rising type of component. And also you'll sometimes get into a little bit of mallow, like a malolactic fermentation, which is where some of that buttery kind of character starts to come in. So I think that's very relevant here. All right, so now we're gonna move past the palate, and we're going to, well, actually, I want you to do this. This is a really great exercise that will follow throughout the rest of this evening with the next 5 tequilas. So I want you to go ahead and smell it again and try to lock in that idea into your mind, what you're smelling. Then I want you to breathe naturally outside of the glass, and we're going to try this exercise. So take the glass again, raise it up to your nose, drop the glass about an inch, open your mouth, and now inhale through your mouth and your nose at the same time. Breathe as much of that aroma in through your mouth and your nose together. So from a physiological standpoint, you have olfactory glands on the back part of your tongue. So when you smell like this, what's happening is that you're pulling that aroma not only through your nostrils, but also across your tongue. And those olfactory glands on the back part of your tongue are being hit by that aroma, sending signals to your brain, giving you a richer interpretation of what it is that you're smelling. So if you've ever heard that old kind of wives' tale, which actually kind of works, that if somebody were to feed you something without telling you what it was, you have your eyes closed and you're trying to guess what it is without actually being able to smell it, there's some truth there, because so much of what we're tasting is actually happening through our sense of smell. And a lot of what we're smelling actually happens on our tongue, believe it or not. So just remember from now on through the rest of tonight, as you're smelling, to try to smell with your mouth open at the same time and get that full, rich sense. And what I find is that with your mouth open, I think it was Amanda that said butter. Was Amanda or Jane? There's Amanda. To me, that concept of butter is even more prevalent when I'm smelling with my mouth open. There's a lot of richness there. So let's go ahead and taste. I know some of you have tasted already, but if you haven't, we'll taste twice and do this exercise again through the rest of the night. You're going to taste once, swallow, don't think too much about it. Taste it a second time. At that point, you let that liquid sit in your mouth, let it roll underneath your tongue, push the liquid to the roof of your mouth, into your gums, and really let that tequila absorb into your mouth. So we'll go ahead and taste twice here. And I want you to think about the adjectives, because that's the next question I'm going to ask you. What is it that you're tasting?
A little peppery.
I love that. Absolutely. I think it's quite a bit peppery, maybe more than a little. I like that. Yeah. Who said that? Was that Michael? Yeah, that's great. Who else? What do you got?
Limestone, lemon.
Lemon. Yeah.
Yeah. So I
What
get the
else?
limestone, the salt kind of transformed into that limestone sort of crushy flavor with the lemon on top of it. Green pepper, black
Yes.
pepper, all kinds of
Love
interesting
that.
little notes in it.
A
Yeah.
little minty sweetness at the very back.
Yeah, maybe. So there's a little bit of that green character and then some sweetness on the backside. Yep. For
Yeah, I
me,
get I agree. I get a lot of the minerality in this one, and there's like kind of like a
Yep.
fresh herbaceous quality to it, like fresh
for sure,
produce from the
again, that
garden.
green. Yeah, absolutely. So we're confirming some of those things that we smelled, right? So some of those same notes that we got on the nose, we're getting on the palate. What about from a weight perspective? Would you consider this thin, medium, or heavy as far as weight is concerned?
We both think medium.
Yeah.
I'd
Who
say
else?
I'd say light. I'd say it's very light.
What else do you guys think? Tim, what do you think?
Probably go more medium-ish.
Yeah, and keep in mind, right? Like I'm assuming that a lot of you are bourbon drinkers, and so tequila, of course, is a different category from bourbon, right? It's probably not going to be as weighty as a lot of your bourbons will be. I would put this at least in that medium category for me personally. I would confirm what we saw on the viscosity as we were swirling it. There's a good amount of weight here. It kind of coats the palate. It goes. I would say that medium to medium plus or heavy tequilas go side to side on my palate, whereas if something is like kind of lighter and racier, it will go front to back as you drink it, and kind of disappear pretty quickly. This one to me kind of camps out and hangs in a very pleasant and refreshing way. The next thing that we'll talk about is finish. What do you get from a finish perspective? How does it feel on your esophagus? Is it a fast, medium, or long finish? And is it lingering, or does it dissipate pretty quickly?
Feel like it dissipates pretty quickly on this one, but I am getting like that minerality, and it's super smooth.
Yeah, I hear that. Cool.
Yeah, it doesn't have that tequila hit, where it's like, oh, it's very smooth. You can drink it.
Yeah,
Mine
yeah,
stayed on the
absolutely.
palate. Mine stayed on the palate a reasonable length of time. I thought I could still taste some of the notes for a nice length of time after. It wasn't just like gone.
Yeah, I was the same way, Tim.
Yep.
I feel like I get like that peppery spice, but just for like a moment, and then it kind of poofs for me.
Yeah, and look, like there again, even perception when it comes to finish or weight, there's no wrong answer, right? It's all what you're feeling individually. So don't feel like what you're saying here is has to be the class answer. It's all an individual interpretation. For me, I think that the finish is probably medium. Ocho has several different releases, and sometimes some of them are a little bit more mineral driven and a little bit lighter. Some of them are a little bit more full bodied and tend to have a longer finish. It really just depends on the vintage and the Rancho. That's why I think Ocho is such a very interesting brand in that regard, because they're all different. So the next thing that we're going to talk about from a brand perspective as we move into the Repo next. Don't taste it yet. We'll do it together. But I'll tell you this about the Repo. So those of you who may not be super familiar with the brand, hopefully you can see this. Let me take my blurred screen off. That's not helping you out. If I can figure out how to do that. Basically, I just want you to be able to see that the color on this thing is not it's not very dark, right? I mean, if you can see this color here, you see that it is it's pretty light, right? I mean, it's not that much darker than the Plata. The reason is because going back to that concept of terroir with Tomas and Carlos starting the brand, they wanted to, well, first of all, Tomas originally thought, why don't we just have a brand that is just a Plata, just a Blanco? Let's launch the brand, and that's all that'll ever be, because we're terroir focused. We don't want to mess around with aging. We want people to taste as much agave as they possibly can. We want them to taste the agave from individual fields, to compare all of them, compare vintages, and that's the way the brand should be. They realized back in 2007, 2008, as this brand is launching, that the viability of a tequila with just a Blanco probably wouldn't last. Nowadays we have Lalo and maybe some other brands that have launched that are doing okay with just a Blanco, but back then they didn't think it was possible. So they said, okay, if we need to have a Repo Añejo and Extra Añejo, what can we do to make sure that we're adhering to the original concept of terroir-driven, agave-focused tequila? So Carlos thought, well, how about this? I've got El Tesoro, I've got the Tapatio, I've got other brands. I can use these other brands and put these brands in barrels until that barrel is essentially fatigued. That barrel may have one life left to give, and then we'll put the Tequila Ocho Plata in there and age it. So that's what they did. So they're taking barrels that are essentially maybe up to 20 years old before they put Ocho Plata in there and start aging it. And then they're going to age on the bare minimum of requirements. So for those of you who may not know this, you've got classifications, age statements that are required by law. So for a reposado has to be aged between 2 months and 1 year. Can't be aged less than 2 months, and it could be aged more than 1 year, but it would then be an añejo. So 2 months to 1 year for a repo. Anything over 1 year before 3 years, 1 to 3, is considered an añejo, and anything over 3 years is considered an extra añejo. So how long do you think they're aging their reposado? Let me hear some guesses.
2 months.
Over 2 months.
2 months. That's exactly right. Technically, if we wanted to be a little cheeky about it, 8 weeks and 8 days. Because of Tequila Ocho, they like to say 8 weeks and 8 days. But essentially, you can, for all intents and purposes, is essentially the bare minimum in these distressed barrels. That's why there isn't much focus on color, but there's a lot of focus on agave and flavor, right? So let's move into tasting the repo. So we'll look at color. If you've got something white near you, or hold it up to the light. What do we get here from a color perspective? Go ahead and unmute again and let me know what you think color. What would you call this?
Pale gold straw.
Love that. Both of those are excellent. Pale gold or straw. I use
Bleached
straw quite
straw.
a bit. I'll even,
Bleached straw.
yeah, I would even say light straw here, right? I mean, it's pretty light. Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna swirl it, and while you're unmuted, go ahead and tell me what you think from a viscosity perspective. Are we looking at light, medium, heavy, somewhere in between, medium plus, light plus? What do we think?
I'll say this one strikes me more as a heavy because I've got tears at the top that still haven't rolled down. So
Yeah.
Yep, that's what my glass is telling me too. If I were grading this, if this were a blind test or blind tasting, I would call this at least medium plus, if not high viscosity.
A lot of tears.
Okay, let's go ahead and put a nose on this. Go ahead and try that experience, right? We're gonna drop it an inch again, open the mouth and breathe through. What are we getting on the nose here? What are some adjectives?
I've been nosing it for a while because we kind of killed that plata real fast.
Yeah.
So I got salinity, minerality again, vanilla and caramel from the barrel influence, I assume. I got those same florals, and then I got some citrus like lemon and grapefruit.
Yeah, I was gonna say citrus. Citrus popped out on this one more.
I love all of that. Yep, fantastic. Anybody else? I'll say this. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say the floral note is it's kind of almost like a daylily kind of scent. It's that weird, like you would think like vanilla flower kind of smell. It's got that vanilla under it, but it's
There's something else. There's like a green part on top of it.
yeah.
Yep, I get that. I also get a bit of like almost like a
lemongrass.
yeah, I was gonna say I get like a lemon cookie, right? There's like a
Yeah, that's the citrusy sweetness. That perfect.
yep. Mm-hmm. All right, let's put it on the palate and we'll taste it twice.
It's got a little bite.
Oh, I like that.
It's like a snickerdoodle with an attitude.
I love that.
What did you just call me, Jane?
You heard me.
Snickerdoodle.
You're
I
a
was gonna say-
snickerdoodle.
I was gonna say kind of almost like lemon shortbread a little bit for me.
Love that. Lemon shortbread, absolutely. So this
Okay.
is the San Geronimo 2023, and for me, this is a star rancho. What I mean by that is we've just described a pretty wide gamut of flavor profiles when it comes to tequila, right? Especially the way Mike started, right? Like Mike is talking about minerality and floral notes and vegetal notes and all these things, and then we're layering on top of that, lemon cake and different types of floral notes. I mean, there's a wide range here. It's not just like an interesting minerality with a couple of other things, right? It's pretty wide here. If we had, and I didn't want to give you a San Geronimo Plata and a Repo. I wanted you to get the experience of a different rancho. But if you have a chance to see the San Geronimo Plata, it is fantastic as well, right? And what I am telling people is that for me, San Geronimo is one of those kind of instant stars from the Ocho lineup that I think in a couple years, traders and people that collect these things are going to be saying, "Hey, that was a superstar, and it's become valuable because it is so well rounded." I get a lot of that with the repo too. Even once we introduce some of that oak, it's just so nuanced and has a lot of angles to it. I find it to be very, very pretty, very elegant.
Yeah, usually I like blancos more than reposados, weirdly, or maybe not so weirdly. But in this case, I definitely prefer the reposado. There's a lot more going on. On the palate, I got the vanilla and the citrus and the minerality and that green pepper thing still, but it's mixed with like the mild oak tannins and some
Yes.
like mint on the back end that I got and like a candy sweetness. It's really good.
Yeah, it is unique and fun and different. Love that. How about the finish? What do we get there?
Medium long.
Yep, it
Yeah.
lingers.
I'm gonna agree
Yeah,
with that.
definitely 6
Medium
round.
well. Yep. And sometimes
And the
I'll
fin-
go
and in
ahead.
the finish, I really get this that has that citrusy sweetness, but I think for the finish, it really turns into this like straw grassy note. That's what really is lingering in my palate.
Yeah, it's interesting because you can kind of do that whiskey smack here with this and pull that character out even after it's been gone for a couple minutes. It's still there. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I get like lemon rind mixed with mild sugar. It's nice.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so we've got 2 months, 2 months and 8 days, right? So on the repo. So now we'll move into the añejo. So we have Sierra Grande 2020 here. I find the añejos to be, well, I don't want to spoil it. I'll talk about what I think about añejos after we taste. So let's do things in reverse order here. Instead of talking about it, let's taste and then we'll talk. So let's go through it from a tasting perspective. What do we get color-wise here? What do you think? In my mind, it really isn't all that different from the repo, right? I mean, if we're gonna call light straw or pale gold here, they're both those adjectives would work. Any adjective you're going to use for the repo, you're going to be able to use for the añejo. I've got a bottle that's a little bit older here, but if you look at that, I mean, it's extremely light. You'd be hard pressed to find an añejo, I think, lighter than this one. Let's go ahead and look at viscosity. We'll swirl that bad boy. I feel like we should have the Jeopardy music going on here. I mean, for me, this one might even be thicker than the last. I've got a line here that's barely even starting to turn into tears.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
This is heavy-ish.
Just now starting to come down.
Yeah.
So we're gonna call that one heavy for sure. So
Yeah,
we can
that's heavy.
anticipate what we'll get when we put on the palate. All right, nose perspective. Let's nose it. All right. All kinds of fun stuff going on here. What do we got?
Whiskey.
Yeah. I mean right, like it's sitting in the year in those barrels, right? So for you whiskey drinkers, you're gonna start to be able to recognize some things here. I'm getting cherries. I get like a caramelized apple, red apple specifically. There's
Yeah,
definitely
I'm with you there. I definitely get more of the barrel influence here. I wrote down like the citrus is kind of turned into an orange juice with more sweetness.
yes, great call there.
I got a lot of spearmint, which is weird on an añejo to get a lot of spearmint, but my second nosing, it just like came like a punch to the face. It was crazy.
Yeah, that's beautiful. The reason why I laugh and love that concept is or idea is because remember that the whole reason why we're looking at really light aging is because we want some of that agave to pull through. So when you're getting green notes and fresh notes here, that's still the agave singing through despite the barrel. Let's go ahead and put it on the palate twice if you haven't already.
Feels a little minty on the palate for me.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Definitely.
It's
For me,
almost
my
like
first.
a toffee apple.
Oh yeah, I love that.
Toffee apple that you used a green stick for.
Yes. I get like a little of the crumble on top of like an apple dessert. I love how warm it is, right? It's very comforting. The heat is it's very just warming. That sounds kind of weird. The heat is warming, but it's pleasant,
Yeah, soothing.
soothing.
It's a warmer,
There we go.
mint than a cool mint.
Yep.
Yes.
It's almost
Agreed.
got a little char to it. I would assume.
Yeah, it's
that would
interesting
be-
you say that because now I put my nose in it and I even
'cause
get it
I
a
was
little bit on the
smelling
nose.
it, I'm not smelling it like it's smoky. It's like a tiny
No,
little
it's the-
bit of leftover char from the barrel. So it's like
That's a
just
great
a
call.
little bit. It's enough to like kind of send it towards vanilla. Which
Yeah.
is
There's a sweetness to the
would make
char
it
though.
toffee rather than caramel. Because
There's a little sweetness to the char, like you burnt the caramel, but not in a
Yeah.
bad way.
Yeah, or
Yeah, there's like a crystallized sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But yeah, a little dark, but with a little bit of that.
Creme
it's
Yeah.
like campfire apples.
I get a decent
Yeah.
amount more tannins on this than the last than the reposado. Like quite a bit more tannins.
Yeah, kind of smacking it from a finish perspective. It gives you a bit of a dry character.
Yeah, very dry finish. A lot more of the bitter tannins, not in a bad way, just bitter. But yeah, it's also
Which I
good.
think is great. To me, that provides some structure on the backside, right? It gives it a little bit of a backbone, almost like a bookend there. I think for me the finish, and I'll kind of spoil it, but and I listen to what you have to say. But for me, there's a very long finish here. But I like how that structure of that tannin gives it kind of a back end. What do y'all think on the finish on this one?
Dry.
Definitely dry.
Much drier
Yep,
than the first two, yeah.
it's not
Dry
like a
and-
lifting finish that just
Dry and
dissipates.
peppery. Dry and a
Yeah.
little more peppery, and the pepper kind of goes the longer that it goes.
Yeah, and I oftentimes like to think about what type of pepper, right? Is it a white bright pepper, or is it a green kind of crisp pepper, or is it a black pepper? To me, this one is a little bit more black. It's a little more brooding.
Yeah.
Right. That's delicious.
To me, this is almost a combination of pink pepper and white pepper.
I love that. Yeah. Okay.
It's got
Cool.
because the pink has just a slight bit of sweetness, but it's still got the bite. And the white it's always had this really odd dusty pepper note to me.
Ah, that's a fun explanation. I love
Yeah.
that.
It's
All right.
dusty, spicy. I don't know. I mean, it comes out of the cabinet. God knows how long it's been there. But
Yeah. Right.
it's interesting that this and the Repo both have a little bit of astringency, but the Repo
Yep.
is all at the front and this is all at the back.
One of the things I like to think about when I talk about astringency, because I love that word, particularly with Ocho, is that remember that these barrels are really old, right? They've been used for so many years beforehand. So I feel like we're gonna pick up certain notes from these barrels that we might not from any other spirit, right? So if you think about that, all these flavor notes have already been taken up by other spirits, and what's left to give, right? I feel like that astringency or some of that like wood tannin character like Mike was talking about, like those are some of the things that are always going to be there because it is wood no matter what. You're going to get some of that. So I've actually never talked to anybody about this. I like that, Jane. I like the idea of that astringency is left over or is probably coming from the fact that that wood has been used, you know, and is just old wood, essentially. Love that. All right. I haven't been able to follow the chat too closely, but I just saw something pop up about rinsing. Yeah, I mean, if you're using the same glass for each tequila, I would definitely go ahead and give it a rinse. You don't have to, because this is essentially, the same brand, but they are different fields. So I think it's good to give it a quick rinse. And the water in the glass isn't going to hurt it. Before we move on, I just want to say one quick thing about the añejo, because we didn't really talk about that. Understanding that, of course, we're pulling this out of the barrel at year on the dot, right? 1 year, it's coming out. It's going into a resting tank, letting it sit there for a bit before it goes in the bottle. But we don't want to let it sit in the barrel for any more than a year, because again, it's minimally aged, right? So next, we're going to move into the extra añejo. So the extra añejo for me, I will just preface this tasting with saying that I'm an agave nerd. I've been involved in agave for a really long time. Tequila Ocho's extra añejo for years and years and years has been my favorite tequila in the world. I absolutely adore it. And here's my story. Why? So who here, by show of hands, enjoys drinking wine? Any wine drinkers? Almost everybody here. I love tequila. I've got all kinds of tattoos about agave. I drink a ton of mezcal. I'm a national ambassador. I drink more wine than anything, mostly because it's just easy to drink, right? At 14% or whatever. I mean, I'm drinking wine pretty much every night with my wife. So when I first started to drink wine many, many years ago, maybe I'm buying like $2 Chuck or something really inexpensive, right? And eventually you grow up and you start spending a little bit more money. And oftentimes the trajectory of a wine drinker's experience starts with something inexpensive, and they start buying more and more expensive things because they can afford it as they're making more money. I'll tell you, oftentimes in the wine world, working in restaurants, what I've seen is that sometimes people will get stuck in California, but other times people will move past California and get into European wines. If you drink European wines, you find that they're very different from California or New World wine, right? Very earth-driven, very terroir-driven again, very funky at times. If you get into Bordeaux and Burgundy specifically, you find that the more money you spend on them, the better they become. But there's also an interesting thing that happens. Those wines from Burgundy and Bordeaux specifically tend to become very nuanced the older they get. So if you first started to drink old world wine when you were 21 or 23 or 24, you definitely wouldn't appreciate them, right? You would have no idea what's going on. You would think it's weird. You wouldn't be into it. Somebody'd hand you a glass of California Cab and you're like, fuck yeah, this is fantastic, right? So you get older, you get into drinking these old world wines, and now all of a sudden you're spending a lot of money because you realize that in old Bordeaux, there's nothing better. Or there's nothing better than a very old Burgundy, right? The first time you taste something that's got a little age on it and you like it, you're like, oh my God, this is great. Why do I like it? I like it because it's nuanced. I like it because it has a depth of character that I can't find in a younger wine. That's what aging will do, right? It will create these nuances that a younger wine simply can't have. And that's what we find with Tequila Ocho. So Tequila Ocho, extra añejo, very light in color, right? And we'll skip over the color component once we get to the tasting, because I'll talk about it right now. But this is more of like a light gold color, right? It's got a little bit more color to it, but it's still fairly light. 3 years on the dot. That's the bare minimum age for extra añejo. Then we're pulling it out. But what I think is most amazing about this tequila is that it is like that aged Bordeaux, right? For the novice tequila drinker, they probably won't get it. For the person who's a thinking consumer who can sit here and be on a call and pull notes apart, this is the type of tequila that is nuanced and layered, and for me is like a really good book. It just keeps going. You turn the page and you want to turn another page. Like, oh my God, I can't wait to see what's next. So let's get into the tasting. We talked about the color. I would say this is as a light gold, still pretty light. There are extra añejos that get as dark as bourbons, right? This is definitely not there. From a viscosity perspective, what do we get? Let's hear it. Go ahead and unmute and tell me what you get.
Pretty medium heavy on this one as well.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting.
Yeah, at least, right? Sometimes we hesitate to say heavy because you think, well, there's probably something that's heavier than this, but this is pretty heavy, guys.
Just compared to the Blanco, so much more.
Yeah. Agreed. Okay, let's go. Let's put on the nose. What do we get? And take your time with this, right? Like this is some really special tequila here. It's not cheap. It's you know, it's hard to find too. Like we don't always have this available.
Cherries.
What kind of cherries? Is this a bright Bing cherry or is it a Morosco cherry? Is it covered in syrup or is it like in your kid's Shirley Temple?
No, it's a nice dark cherry.
Yep. Agree with that. What else?
Granite and prairie sweetgrass.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Well done, Jane. What else?
It's like lemon flower, lemon blossom.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's not the fruit, it's before the fruit is set. It's that, you know, if you walk through an orchard
The
full
high
of
note.
flowers.
Yep.
Really
I get a
Absolutely.
little cocoa powder in the nose, like deep in the
Oh.
nose.
Dig that. Yes. Drop that glass and breathe through your mouth.
I
What
would say
else?
like a caramelized onion, maybe.
Oh, that's kind of fun. Yeah. That's that bright note, right? Because it has a very bright kind of note. What about some tertiary characteristics? Like what's beyond fruit? What are you getting any like
lavender.
lavender? Like to me, there's like an old dusty oak. Like I think about like this is gonna be an interesting story, but I used to stay with my grandmother a lot when I was a kid. In her spare bedroom, she had this dresser drawer that must have been passed down from her grandmother, right? And when I would open it, this very old oak smell I would get. That's what I get here.
That's kind of where I was getting the granite from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Some old dusty rock that's been there for a while.
Totally.
Definitely see what you mean about nuanced. It's definitely taking me longer to pull taste the nose out, you know.
Yeah, because it's not
There's a lot
just
going
gonna
on.
hit you. It's kind of like I'm sure some of you here may remember some of those old scratch and sniff stickers that we had as kids, right? A scratch and sniff that is like a year old, right? Like it's no longer like in your face. You got to scratch it a few times and be like, what was that, right?
Smells a bit like the lotion that my grandmother used to use. It's like a little bit of rose and a little bit of Cornhuskers mixed together. It's the weird stuff, but
Yeah.
it's that
Yeah.
kind of, it's not glycerin, but you know what I mean? It's just, there's this element of creamy that it isn't really cream,
Yes.
but it's
Yep,
that
like it's missing
note
that.
from
It's
the rose and it smells like my grandma's lotion.
I love
You
it.
not been gay?
Not Bengay.
I kind of get like black licorice.
Oh yeah, like a little like a muted
The
anise kind of
aftertaste.
character.
Yep, anise.
If you haven't
Again-
tasted it yet, let's go ahead and put it on your palate twice. And I want you to really think about this one as you taste it.
Chris, you're definitely right. It's got an old taste to it.
Absolutely.
Got an, I mean,
I like that it's smooth and it just kind of goes down easy.
mhm, mhm.
Definitely
Yeah,
good.
it's super buttery.
Yes.
It's like buttered popcorn with smoked paprika sprinkled all over it.
And it doesn't linger.
You know, and if we were to think about how other extra añejos sometimes will taste, sometimes extra añejos are very rich, very like sweet, very full bodied. This to me, you know, Michael mentioned it. This is a little bit of that older character, right? It's not in your face. It's not gonna make you think, wow, that is that's really rich. I wouldn't use the word rich here, right? For me, it's more nuanced.
Evening drink.
Yeah,
An
more
evening
of that
drink.
unctuous mouthfeel, a little bit of umami to it.
Like you
Yeah.
just relax,
Umami.
kind of overlooking the lake.
Yeah, I love that.
The flavors kind of come in a wave. They start in one aspect and then kind of change in the mouth, and then you hit once you swallow, then the finish kind of gets that a little bit of a spicy,
Kind of a sweet
peppery,
finish.
minty at the back end, which is kind of a nice little journey just in a 5-second,
Yeah.
10-second.
Isn't that wild, right? To me, that's why I love this tequila so much, because journey, I think, Tim, is such a great word for it, right? Like you've got so many different things going on that it's just fun to kind of ride the wave, so to speak. From
Yeah,
really from the nose all the way to the finish, it takes you on an adventure.
there's a lot going on this one. I'm gonna probably have to get a bottle of this somewhere and
I know.
really delve in. I got like a dusty sweetness, orange rind, buttery caramel, pepper, oak tannins, like a burnt mint kind of thing going on, and the anise that Jess had mentioned, and it's adding every time I sip.
All right, Chris, where can we find this one?
Total Wine Conversation.
Yeah, you know, I just saw somebody posting in that it's at Total Wine. I haven't seen that Total Wine by me because they only have had the Plata and the Repo recently. But you know, I think that I'll leave you all with my contact here. I don't know some of your liquor stores up north, but I'll find out for you. Make sure we get it in your hands.
Wow.
All right, let's move on. So now we're moving on to special releases. These have been not the easiest to find. The Ocho Widow Jane Repo, which is no longer, you really have a hard time finding this one. The Añejo was just released here in the past month or so here in California. It's going to go fast. If you love it, try to find it as soon as possible. You know what? Actually, to go back to the extra Añejo, I just realized I was up in LA dropping these bottles, and I saw at, I want to say it's CNC, he had the Ocho Extra Añejo. So if any of you are around CNC Liquors, I think he's got a bottle there.
Where's CNC at?
Vadim, do you know where it is exactly? I don't know LA well enough to.
You're talking about OC Bottle Shop or CN or CNC?
OC Bottle Shop. Yeah,
OC Bottle Shop. Yeah, that's
Yep.
Jeff. I'll toss a link to his website right now. He's got
Yep, thank you. OC Bottle Shop.
He's in Cyprus.
Yep. Okay, so Widow Jane, let's talk about this, right? Who here has had a chance to taste Widow Jane whiskey? It looks like everybody. Fantastic. So I don't have to talk too much about Widow Jane. I will tell you that I've been to the distillery in Brooklyn. I've been to the mines up north of New York City where they're pulling the water from for Widow Jane. It's a pretty special place. They produce some pretty damn good whiskey. If you haven't had the Vault, go buy a bottle. It's out of this world. I'm a big fan. I love the tenure. I love the whole lineup, and I've got nothing to do with the brand other than that I work for the same supplier. But it's really great whiskey. The concept of aging Ocho and Widow Jane is a relatively new concept, right? Because so much of the brand is predicated on the concept of aging in ex-bourbon barrels that have been aged or used for a long time. We're kind of flipping the script here, and using first fill bourbon barrels, essentially, right? Or ex-bourbon barrels, I should say. So we'll fill it once and possibly twice, and then that's it. And then that barrel goes away. We are still aging on the minimum side, so just 8 weeks and 8 days for the repo here. The reason why I wanted to put it toward the end of our tasting is because we're looking at a higher ABV. So we're at 45.5, right? So if you're in the agave world, you'll know that higher proof is really the queen darling these days. Everybody's wanting to drink higher proof because it really brings out a lot more of that agave character. So let's get into the tasting here and see if that's true on this one. What do we get from a color perspective? And I'll hold the bottle up here for you to see.
Not as dark. It's not as gold.
Compared to the other repo, I mean,
Yeah, it's about the same.
I'll tell you what, I can't really even tell a difference, which is pretty wild. Okay, how about on the viscosity?
Thick.
Yeah, holy smokes! I have 0 legs on
It
my
takes a
glass.
I
long
have a line that's not moving.
Wow, that's the thickest of all of them by far.
Yeah, easy. It's a
Holy
line
smokes.
that's beating all the way across, and it's not really dropping.
Yep, that's pretty, isn't it? Looks like Christmas tree lights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very peppery.
Okay, on the nose, what do we got?
Very peppery.
Peppery. What kind of pepper? I'm going to fashion you all as professional tasters, right? You're in this kind of environment. So let's go beyond like the initial thought or the initial explanation and take it beyond that, right? Instead of citrus, what kind of citrus is it? Instead of pepper, what kind of pepper is it? Right? Instead of green, what kind of green is it? Right? Like let's take it one step beyond. And even if you're just guessing, right?
This
Just kind of
is
start to
Anaheim
put your mind
chili.
out there. Chili?
An Anaheim chili.
Anaheim chili. That's specific. I like it.
Oh, you said specific.
Love it. You know, to go back to that pepper component, I think it was you, Eric.
Yeah.
For me, I would call this almost a white pepper because it's really bright. There's a lot of high notes.
Yep.
Hint of apple, maybe? A green apple?
Love that. Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
All right, let's put on the palate twice. Get your body used to that 45, right? Because we've been at 40 for a minute now. So the first sip will help you adjust to the 45. Second sip, we're going to get into the character here, flavor.
That's not bad. Got a little bite at the end when it goes down.
There's some
Back
bourbon
end.
notes, a little bit of caramel, vanilla, but like not heavy, just this like
Whisper.
background.
Yeah, it's a whisper.
A little bit of burnt sugar, caramely, creme brulee. I mean, all the typical notes, but just real subtle in the back to go along. It doesn't drown out the agave notes. It just kind of adds to them.
Yeah, I'm getting
definitely-
vanilla
definitely
and
more
caramel
bourbon.
from the barrel on top of a cinnamon sugar churro.
Okay.
I love it.
I love Jane's descriptions. I swear,
Yep. No, all of that is great. I agree with all of that. Jeff, what are you getting up there?
I definitely felt some cinnamon on my end,
Yeah.
but I think I did a bourbon tasting recently and I was telling people this, but like I had COVID last year and I lost my sense of taste and smell. So I feel like during a lot of these like tastings and like my palate is ever so slightly muted. So it's really interesting to hear like people's, descriptions of like all these full, very distinct flavors. And I get like little bits of them. Like I'll get 1 or 2 of those and people get like 5 of them,
Well, hopefully these tastings will help to kind of kickstart it for you, right? Help
Yeah,
pull it back.
definitely. Everything's delicious. So that's good.
Love it. Great.
It has that warm body, kind of warms you up kind of feeling.
Oh, big time. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially like, after a couple sips, like now you're used to that 50
Yeah.
or that 45 and like, yeah, okay, I get
Like
this.
if I'm in a
Okay.
cabin out in the snow somewhere. Oh yeah, this is it.
Absolutely.
In the lodge.
Yeah. I
Definitely
know Jane
getting
mentioned getting like the Anaheim on the nose. On the palate, I'm really getting the roasted Anaheims.
Vadim, you're a
And,
smart ass.
This is exactly what I want to pair with chile verde, actually.
Oh my God, can you imagine? Yeah, that would be a great pairing. I love it. Yep. Yeah,
Definitely getting-
for me,
Dusty
well, let's
Goose.
talk about this. Let's talk about the finish. What do we get from a finish perspective?
Very mild.
Oh, isn't it interesting? It doesn't have the backbone that the Añejo had.
No.
Right. But it's still a long finish, right? I mean, I think there's a commonality here. It's definitely a long finish. It sticks with you. It doesn't really just dissipate ever. Any of them.
It's a pretty good long finish, and I get that pepper kind of lingers quite a bit.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
it's very bold for a reposado. It's a hugely bold flavor. Not just because of the proof. I think that Widow Jane barrel really changed this quite a bit.
Yeah.
It lasts a long time.
The base distillate has such an interesting combination of pepper and sweetness that we've mentioned with, lemony when it's by itself and black pepper mixed with wood. I'm getting just a lot of rye. Like the extra añejo, if I was tasting that blind and I couldn't look at it, I don't think I would have finished saying it, but certainly through, I would have assumed that it was some sort of rye finished or some sort of rye influence. It hit that much, and then because I've had enough tequila whiskey combos that I've had that, but it's not there. But I really like what the wood does to it because it gives it that, it's not baking spice. It's definitely more pepper, but there's like the hint of mint. It's like a kissing cousin to a rye in a really good way, which is also what I enjoy drinking in winter when it's cold. It's all those same evocative notes to a really pleasant rye. And it's just, but I can just tell it's the backbone of the distillate mixing with the wood. This is what it does. And it's really nice.
Yeah, that's well said, Jordan. There's a really interesting interplay between that agave and the wood and the way that they mingle, right? They commingle very well. That's well said. All right, so let's move on to the new release, the Widow Jane Añejo. So the Reposado, again, 8 weeks.
A quick little poll for the first four as we do that, as we move on.
Oh, you're killing
I didn't have ready a second ago. But you are welcome to continue.
All right. So Widow Jane Añejo. This is aged for 1 year on the nose. Let's talk about the color. We'll go through the official tasting here, right? The color on the Añejo versus the Repo. I think that's a good indication there.
Definitely dark.
Comparing it to the extra Añejo. It's certainly darker than the Repo.
It's more of a light gold.
Yep.
Yeah,
This is
It's not pale. It's actually got some color to it,
Yeah, this is the most
but
colorful.
not much.
This is actually darker than the I've got full bottles here of the Añejo and the Widow Jane. I'm sorry, the extra Añejo and the Widow Jane Añejo. Well, they're pretty close. Pretty close. So yeah, I think there's a full, you could call it a light gold here. So shading toward gold. All right, how about viscosity?
I'm getting medium plus out of it.
I've got a line with like no legs.
Yeah, heavy.
Yep.
Yeah, I would have to go with heavy again on this one, or at least medium plus, because it's looking pretty similar to the last one. Okay, on the nose. So even if your glass is empty, take your añejo, the Widow Jane añejo in your right hand, and then take the Widow Jane repo in your left. And let's go back and forth.
It's not as peppery.
Or fruitier.
It's fruitier, a little sweeter.
To me, it's a little more brooding, right? It's a little darker, whereas the repo, the nose is brighter and more expressive, a little more fruit.
I get more
It's from the
caramel
palate.
on the añejo.
Yeah, it's caramelized, right? It's not like closed kind of character. Let's spin the palate and see what we think.
Like an old oak armchair, that old wood on top of something like a finger lime. It's a citrus, but it's not one that you would normally think
Ooh.
of.
This is very distinguished.
We're at 48%, so slightly elevated in alcohol.
Ooh. What would barrel strength equivalent be? What are you distilling at? Just out of curiosity.
So tequila by law cannot be over 55.
Okay.
And so you'll see some barrel strengths coming in as high as that. Oftentimes they'll be closer to like 53-ish.
So this is that, and it is proof down just a little bit at 48 because that's where it was.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Have you ever tried making a syrup and forgot it was on the stove and ended up making caramel? I made a mint syrup that turned into caramel, and that's what this tastes like, is a caramel mint syrup.
I got
Yeah, absolutely.
definitely more bourbon forward. I get a lot of that caramel and vanilla, obviously. The minerality is still coming through quite a bit, with almost like a olive thing I got on the nose more than some of the others, which is weird. And then bright candied, like if you took green pepper and then candied them somehow, I don't know, that's what I get. And then honey and mint.
Look at you.
That's kind of a fun idea, candied green pepper. I definitely agree 100% on the minerality.
Michael, don't give me
Like that
ideas.
minerality is for sure there.
Michael's trying to impress the wife.
She said I sound like a snob.
He is.
Mission accomplished.
Are these first fill barrels, or kind of what's
Yeah.
the history of the barrel? 'Cause I am just really surprised how light it is in color.
If we were to go, yeah, I mean, history of the barrel, right? Like this is essentially getting shipped down from Brooklyn, and one-time use. Like I mentioned, sometimes a second-time use, but that's it. So it's not like a traditional bourbon barrel that we're using multiple times with other distilleries, right? Like we're wanting that Widow Jane character to be present. But it's still not an overbearing kind of character in my mind. It's not like a huge amount of oak here. It's there for sure, and I think it's different. You know, if we were to go back to that añejo, if we've got any left, you know, I mean, oh my God, even if you don't have any left, take that añejo glass and smell it. I mean,
Just the regular añejo?
just the regular
extra?
añejo. Yeah. Yep.
I'm almost getting notes of tamarind off this as well.
Yeah.
That regular añejo is sweeter on the nose for sure. Way less pepper.
It's interesting though, like to me, for the Widow Jane repo and the añejo, like I'm surprised how similar it does taste to kind of the core line. Not in like a good or bad way. You can really feel the commonality.
which I think is probably a good thing, right? It would be a little weird from a brand perspective if it were just completely different and way out there, because the barrel really should just be part of the equation. Tequila is different from whiskey in the sense that so much of what we're looking for with whiskey has to do with the barrel, right? Has to do with how long it's in the barrel, where it's being aged and whatnot.
On that Widow Gin and Añejo, the finish is where it's at for me. It's nice and long. It's got some tannins and a lot of that white pepper and some really nice salinity and that like sweetness in the background just a little bit.
That was on the Widow Jane and Añejo, Mike?
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and, for me, when I go back to the regular Añejo now, there's more of that pronounced cookie character, right? I get a lot of that cookie character, and it's really round. Maybe it's because it doesn't have the alcohol component there, right? Whereas sometimes that alcohol can add a bright, sharp character. Maybe because we're going back to 40%, it feels rounder, just the regular Añejo does. Let's do this. If you have tequila left, go back and taste them. If you don't have tequila left, go back and just smell them. But go back now and just take a moment on your own and examine them all, right? And think about them and see how they've changed and morphed from what we were originally tasting.
Now that my glass is
And I'm just-
empty.
Yeah, look, even if your glass is empty, you're still going to smell aroma there, right? And I'll just kind of talk about what I'm tasting as I go through here. Feel free to do the same, all of you. So when I go back to the plata, there's a lot of yeast character here, a lot of that like a lot of that bread rising kind of character.
I really liked the plata when we first tried it. Now going back to it, I won't drink it.
Because of that yeast character?
Yeah, it totally tastes funny now.
Interesting, right?
Yeah.
Things change. Yep. And you wait another 20 minutes, Eric, and everything will be different. It's the weird thing about these kinds of tastings. This is very interesting what happens to your palate. For me, the repo is there's even on the nose, there's just a lot of oak. Like that's the predominant character. And on the palate, red fruit. Oh my God, red fruit. Delicious. Lemon cake on the añejo. Extra añejo is a little bit of that oak again. Just wild.
Yeah, that red bull's not bad.
All right, we're taking some kind of a picture here.
Yeah, we have a tradition that I totally forgot to do. Wade and Wes, come on back. There we go. Everyone raise a glass. And we want to say thank you. Chris, thanks for being here with us. Thank you to Tequila Ocho. And cheers. Raise a glass, smile to the camera.
Cheers.
Perfect.
I never see these pictures.
You never see these pictures? I can post it in the group.
I never see pictures. Where do you post these pictures at?
I just save them.
Really exists.
You're not subscribed to his OnlyFans, I guess.
I guess not.
I would love to see the results, and I'll oftentimes ask this in any kind of tasting that I do. But oh, can you all hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Break it up a little bit.
Can you all hear me?
Padre, suck. What?
I froze there for a second. I definitely didn't hear that. All right. So for those of you who loved the plata the most, let's see a raise of hands. Plata.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
No plata lovers.
So I can share the.
How about okay? One.
results if you want.
How about Yeah,
Throw
let's
the
see it.
poll
Let's
results
see it.
up.
What do you think was the favorite
Poll
overall?
results.
Chris, what do you think was the overall favorite? Oh no, we're killing his reception.
Oh
Are
man.
you still here?
He's there.
Yeah,
Say
I'm
it
here.
again.
What do you?
I think the extra añejo.
Okay. The results are in, and here are the votes. Widow Jane Añejo just took it by 1 vote.
Wow. How about that? All right.
Yeah, so
You
we
know,
have-
and maybe part of that is you know, how many of you all are big whiskey drinkers? Maybe that has something to do with it. Let's take a picture of that.
I'm definitely a big whiskey drinker, but weirdly with tequila, I generally gravitate towards Blanco. But yeah, that Widow Jane Añejo and the extra Añejo, those were both my picks for tonight.
Yeah,
I
it's
just think there's a
definitely.
lot more depth to it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So,
I'm a big whiskey drinker. Oh, someone go for it.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I'm a big whiskey drinker, but interestingly enough, I was kind of going back and forth just between the Repo and the regular Añejo, not the Widow Janes, even though I did like them.
It's safe to say we're all pretty big whiskey drinkers.
Oh,
Jess said
That
she
was
likes
extra
the
añejo
Reposado.
all the way, guys.
So Chris, the results are very different when you take the special editions out. We did the core 4. Here are the results for the core 4. 62% voted extra.
Whoa.
that's 42.
Wow. I'm glad you did it like that. That's interesting to see. Wait a second. There 23% of the people like the Repo in this case, but I don't think anybody voted for the Repo when you folded in the other two.
I think people moved to the Widow Jane Repo on that one because it was
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that was
mostly Widow Jane and Añejo, and then tied Widow Jane Repo and extra Añejo for second.
How very interesting. I love it. Well, guys, well, you've got me for another minute here. What kind of questions do you have for me, or thoughts, comments, concerns? What do you got?
Do you
I'm all
ever see
yours.
Tequila Ocho doing another 888 barrel?
Well, remember that 888 was a really special experience for us because of our association with a number, the fact that we really just launched. So I don't think we'll ever see anything like that again.
That was such an awesome recipe, though.
Yeah, and you know there
And
are
compared to
some,
what we're drinking tonight, I mean, there's a lot more flavor and much darker compared to anything else that we've had tonight.
there are some really awesome things coming up, and you know, I don't know how much I'm at liberty to tell you guys, but I will just say that if you're a fan of certain types of bourbon, you know, I wouldn't mention any kind of old Fitzgerald names or anything like that, but there will be some other collaborations coming down the line. Keep your eye out for.
Yeah, that was a question that I had. How's the partnership with Heaven Hill been for you guys?
Oh, absolutely fantastic. I'll tell you, I went to my first national sales meeting here last month in Kentucky, and Heaven Hill, what an incredible company they are. I really didn't know anything about Heaven Hill before I started this job. I've been in this role now for almost a year. Coming up in I was hired in April, started in May. And you know, as a restaurant guy and operator, I didn't really know anything about Heaven Hill, and to go down and to become, you know, friendly with the co-presidents, Kate and Alan Latz, and to hear what that company is all about. The fact that we're part of a family-owned company is a really big deal. Basically, what that means is that other tequilas will get acquired by, you know, Diageo, or, you know, these huge multinational, you know, conglomerates that are just enormous. Heaven Hill is not that. In fact, Heaven Hill has essentially allowed Samson and Surrey to continue to operate as if we're our own individual company. And that has meant Ocho and Vago and all the other, brands, whether it be we have Few Whiskey, Widow Jane, Bren, which is a French Scotch, and Blue Coat Gin. Those round out our portfolio. All of them are going to continue to operate essentially as independents, and it's awesome. So we don't have to worry about Ocho going the way of like a Cazadores did many years ago, or a number of brands that change after they get acquired. Casa Noble, we all know brands that change after they get acquired. I'm not at all worried about that with Tequila Ocho. In fact, it's the exact opposite. We simply have more resources to do bigger and better things now. So, when you start to see Ocho all over the place, it's not because it's changed, it's because they have Heaven Hill money behind them. We built a new distillery. We moved out of La Alteña into a brand new distillery called Los Alambiques, and the place is much bigger, but all of the individual components of making the tequila are exactly the same. The ovens are the same size. The fermentation tanks are the same size. The stills are the same size. There's just more of them, so we can produce more. So that's where you'll see things like in 2023, where we have 5 ranches being released because we've got to harvest from more fields in order to put that agave out there. Carlos thinks that he'll probably only need 4 fields for 2024. We'll see how that goes, but it's great. And when you're looking at 37 different fields, and he's harvesting agaves for Tapatio and El Tesoro from these fields as well. He's not worried about the sustainability per se of the agaves that we have, because we've got plenty, and we'll be able to continue to scale without having to compromise. Great question. Other questions?
When will we see the Widow Jane and Añejo here in the Midwest?
That's a good question. I think it's already in Chicago. Where did you say you were in
Kansas City.
Kansas City. So I know some guys down in Kansas City. Hit me up. I think we're Facebook friends, CJ. Hit me up, and
Yes.
we'll make sure that we get you some Widow Jane.
I know the distributor.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I met some of these guys in Kentucky. Some awesome guys in Kansas City.
Yeah.
Your label in Europe is very, very different. I think I texted you when I was out there, and I saw Ocho at like a weirdly weird bar, and they charged me nothing for it. And I was like, well, I'm definitely gonna drink this over the other stuff you're pouring. So
same juice, different labels, but that's about to change. So in the next couple months here, you'll see a complete repackaging designed for Tequila Ocho, and that will be worldwide. So in Europe, you'll see a bottle that has a big 8 on the front of it, and it's been like that since we were launched. That's also a clear plastic label that can be ripped off, so the bartenders can recycle those bottles for lime juice or lemon juice or whatever. When we launched here in the U.S., they wanted a more elevated look for the bars here, and that's where this design came into play. But we've gotten ready for a new design, and so that's about to be launched. You're going to see that hit the market soon, along with a completely different packaging for the Extra Añejo. So the Extra Añejo will be a dark bottle in a very textured glass. It's absolutely stunning. I can't wait for it to hit the market. So for those of you that are collectors, recognize that that this calendar year you'll start to see some new bottles come out. So if you like these labels, snatch them, because they're about to be gone.
Is there anything that I should ask the distillery about on any projects when I go down there? Not next week, but the week after?
Oh man, I think I'll just miss you, because I'll be there pretty soon here too. I'm there the week after you.
I'm there the 17th through the 24th, and I'm visiting them towards the tail end.
Well, I might see you. I'll be there the 20th to the 24th. I'll be actually, I take that back. I'm there the 18th and 19th, and I go to Oaxaca the rest of that week.
Yeah, I'll be over on Cascaween and Fortaleza Tequila area.
Yeah, I would just let Monsley. I'm sorry. I would just let Monse or Fanny or Carlos, whoever or whoever you talk to, let them know that you had a tasting with me and that you're looking forward to the rebottling or the new packaging, and that when have you been to Los Alambiques yet?
No.
They've got a bottle shop there that has all the old vintages. So my recommendation is go in and pick up an old vintage, whatever has been your favorite through the years, and just be prepared to bring it back with you because it's this really awesome, beautiful library, the big ladder. They've got all kinds of really great stuff there.
Do they have any of the
yeah.
888 bottles? That is my unicorn bottle.
I don't know if there's any of that left. I don't think
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Any
heard
plans
when having
to do a joint collaboration with 818 since you're not doing 888 anymore?
Oof.
nasty.
No plans now, and I can confidently say there will be no plans ever.
Do you have any inside information on the Tequila Ocho Puntas? That is my absolute favorite.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, man. The Puntas is really fantastic, and we debated trying to slide that into this lineup. The 2023 release is fantastic. I think that's a concept that will continue. It has been really well received.
Do you see it becoming more of an annual thing instead of biannual?
No, I don't think that you can put a year or a time stamp on it because Carlos really, I mean, this is a true distiller's cut, if you will, right? I mean, he's just not taking he's not taking a distiller's cut and bottling it just because it happens to be at whatever proof and it is what it is. He's waiting until he's tasting something that he finds to be really extraordinary. So there's no plan for it to be any kind of schedule to it, at least to my knowledge at this point. CJ, a really fun question maybe that you can ask them would be, how do they feel about the change in water, right? Because we went from basically a to like a fresh what do you call it? Stream water to deep well water, right? And I'll tell you what the answer is. The answer is that there's always variation with Ocho, so it doesn't necessarily matter. But that's kind of a fun thing to talk to them about. And then you can also ask them about like getting the yeast over from La Altania to the new distillery.
What yeast do they use?
So it's a natural yeast, but you're able to capture a yeast and bring it over. It's not like a proprietary, it's not like a store-bought yeast or anything like that. But they brought that same yeast strain over. The funny thing about yeast, and I'm sure that some of you understand this, but yeast is ever kind of evolving, right? I mean, it's the yeast that you started tequila with is not the same, probably even batch to batch. That might be a little bit too specific, but years later, it's going to change. Like it is influenced. I have a yeast in my refrigerator that I make my fresh bread with, and it changes from time to time. So anyway, good question. Other questions?
They use. Do you know how many generations they get out of that? I used to make beer, and so I could get like use it 8 times in a row before it started to mutate and get funky, and I'd have to get a fresh batch.
That's a good question. I don't know. I've never heard of that, so I'm not sure. I know that they're taking care of the yeast right there. They've got like a little container, and so they're taking care of it. But I don't know if they need to switch it out or whatever. I've never heard of something like that before. So I'm going to put a couple of things here in the chat if you want to look at it before it's closed down. So one of them is my email.
So Tim asked, can you elaborate on the puntas? I know that's the big unicorn. I knew you mentioned it a little bit, but how does it compare to what we tasting now? I know it's higher proof.
Yeah. So basically what puntas means is puntas means heads, and it's the cut between the heads and the heart is where that comes from, right? So a distiller's cut is essentially that sweet spot where they think that's the best part of the distillate. And um and oftentimes, well, it's called distiller's cut because oftentimes they would take that cut and keep it for themselves or to share with family. The sippinglife.com, for those of you who are interested in ever doing any kind of tours or whatever, I often take people down there on tours. Or if you have a birthday, you want to do like this kind of a tasting in a live environment, happy to come up and do that too. And then my email is chris_simmons@samsonandsurrey.com. So that's what a director's cut or the puntas is, right? Is that special kind of part of the distillate. So Carlos released one a couple years ago. It was a huge hit. People loved it. We released one just a few months back. This was a much smaller batch. I don't have exact details in front of me as far as what the batch sizes were, but I know this one was less than half, I believe, of the amount of bottles than the 2021 release. So there's not that much out there. That's part of what drives some of the price. You know, we as a company are not interested in creating this aftermarket demand. It's not something that we're into. We don't really like that part of what's happening. A lot of that's come over from the bourbon world and has really started to infiltrate the tequila world now. We're certainly not into that. That's not why we're creating some of these offshoots, whether it be the Widow Jane releases or the Puntas. But they are an opportunity for Carlos and the people working for him to be creative and to continue to kind of scratch that creative itch, if you will, and do things differently than what we've been doing since the beginning of time, or the beginning of the brand. So that's where some of those special releases come from and why we do them. So the Puntas is really kind of a celebratory type of thing that focuses on Carlos's ability to capture that best part of the distillate and literally bottle it.
What would you say would be the tasting notes, etc., that are either the same or different than what we tasted tonight?
So anytime you have a distillate, particularly a Plata or a Blanco, that is higher in ABV, oftentimes what happens is that you have, and this is the case with the Puntas, you have kind of a magnifying glass on some of the best characteristics of a Plata, right? So you're going to get a lot more cooked agave. You're going to get a lot more of the minerality notes, and you're going to get a lot more of the green notes, right? So in general, and with the plot, and with, I'm sorry, with the Puntas, you get kind of a steroid, Ocho Plata on steroids type of experience. Now, who was it that said earlier? Eric, you mentioned earlier that you weren't in love with this Plata, right? After we went back to it. I would definitely invite you to try different Platas of the Ocho, particularly that San Geronimo, right? Like go back to the San Geronimo if you can find not this Repo that we tasted, but if you don't want to buy a bottle, go to a liquor store or go to a restaurant and get a San Geronimo Plata if you can find it and get a glass of it. The San Geronimo has, in my opinion, a little less of that kind of yeasty character and more of the mineral notes. So Tim, when we talk about like the Puntas, for me, it's not more of what we get in this Potrero Grande, like kind of some of that baking bread yeast character. It's more jalapeno, it's granite, like with a touch of sandstone. It's cooked agave, kind of mingled with some fresh agave, right? It's just very expressive. And that comes after the alcohol. Alcohol is a little bit higher, right? It's a little bit higher, but that's what helps to pull out that agave character.
If you were drinking, or if you had a choice between, and someone's offering you a glass and you can only take one, between the Extra Añejo and the Puntas that's just been released, I think that's on mission. Which would you choose and why?
Yeah, good question.
I know you said
It
the
feel-
Extra Añejo was one of your favorites.
it feels weird for me to answer this, but I would still go Extra Añejo. I know that the Puntas is a special release and it's really fantastic. But I just think that there's something special about the Extra Añejo. I just love how nuanced it is. I find it to be really special. And I drink more Platas than I do anything else. I'm not really an age expression kind of guy. But I just love that Extra Añejo.
Yeah, that's a
What-
good answer.
What did you tell me to go find? So I have this bottle of this Plata, which is Los Nogales.
Yeah,
Nopales.
the Nogales is great.
Or
Yeah.
no,
I was
Los
talking about the
Nopales.
San Geronimo. Yeah,
Yeah.
Los Nogales. Yeah.
Yeah, 2017.
Yep.
And then
Yeah.
I got this Respado 2021, Los Laderas.
Ladera.
Yeah, Laderas.
Yep. Yeah. The Ladera is awesome. The Nopales, that was a pretty interesting ranch. I found that the Plata tended to have a lot of tropical notes to it. Was that the Plata? Yeah. Yep. Pineapple, green banana, actually. There was a lot of green character on the palate. Spearmint and cut grass. That one is delicious. Big fan.
Yeah, some people are
Other
looking
questions?
for the Puntas. I joined the Tequila Investors 2024 on Facebook. The guys there are great, and some prices are great. And I paid $130 for my Puntas, and it was shipped from New York and came packaged well. And I've fallen in love with high strength tequilas now.
It's hard to go back once you start to drink a lot of high strength tequilas. Like I mentioned, and maybe you would agree with me. I'm not sure what your name is there. I don't think it's LGE.
Stuart.
But
My name's Stuart.
Stuart, you might agree with me here that there's just so much agave, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it is like
it is. Yeah, as you said, it's on steroids, and it is just unbelievable. All the characters, the cooked agave, the peppers, the heat, everything that just comes through. And sometimes when you taste the regular Platas, you're like, yeah, these are good and stuff, but I got a problem now. I like still strengths.
I think as a lot of whiskey drinkers here on this talk tonight, you would all agree that, whiskey is better at a higher proof, right? I mean, if you drink 40%, you're probably thinking, oh my God, this is so boring. Jane, you disagree? For me, I like a little higher. I like a little higher proof. I just enjoy it. I find that there's a little more flavor. There's a little more character. Of course, there's a sweet spot. You can get too hot, and then you start to lose some of that. But I think that particularly with high proof, Platas or Blancos, if you will, there's just so much agave that it's hard to argue that. Really delicious stuff.
I enjoy Carlos's other brand a lot on their high proof, the Tapatio 110.
Oh,
Oh my
you're right.
gosh.
You're right on the mark. That is like a beautiful tequila. That one is awesome. I can get that readily here in Arizona.
Yeah, we keep it, and I'm looking at about 4 bottles now.
Yeah,
Stuart,
and
where in
it's not
Arizona
that
are
bad
you?
of a price. I'm in
Yeah.
Scottsdale, Arizona.
Hey man, do you ever go to the Agave Heritage Festival down in Tucson? I lost you there for a second. What'd you say?
Oh,
There you are.
so to Tucson.
I think your connection is bad, Stuart. But for anybody else who's interested, the Agave Heritage Festival happens in Tucson in April, and It is a really good time. It's a very interesting festival because it's different from a lot of other festivals that you may have gone to, in that there are a lot of botanists. There's a lot of focus on the agave in general. But Tequila Ocho and Mezcal Vago are going to have a very heavy presence at the Agave Heritage Festival this year. We're going to do a really great pairing dinner. We're going to have a beautiful tasting with Vago. And it's just a really fun time in Tucson at a time of the year where it's not too hot down there. So I recommend, if you're interested, look it up and come on down and join us for the weekend. It's a ton of fun. Tucson's a cool little town. Other questions, thoughts, comments, concerns?
What's your favorite tequila event? I'm trying to pick one to go to this year.
Straight up just agave event?
Yes.
You know, that's a great question. I worked them all over the country. I would probably have to tip my hat to Susan and Mexico in a Bottle. I really like what she does. She's got a few of them. There's one in San Francisco, San Diego, Chicago. Where else? I think Mexico in a Bottle is one of the better ones. Come down to San Diego. It's close, and it's going to be happening. It happens in the fall-ish, like I want to say November. Great time. There's a few others like Arte Agave, Tequila X. There's several around the country, but I think Mexico in a Bottle. Well, CJ, do you like mezcal?
No, I don't like the
Okay.
smoke.
Yeah, you know what? I'll hit you up. Maybe Tequila X in Chicago. Mexico in a Bottle started as a mezcal event, so there aren't as many tequila vendors there. It's like there's becoming more, but it's pretty heavy on mezcal too. But I did Tequila X in Chicago last year, and that was a pretty good time.
Okay.
Yeah. Good question. Who else has got one for me?
How are things at Vago doing?
Vago is fantastic, and when you have me on next for a Vago tasting, we're gonna get CJ back in here because he'll find a mezcal that's not smoky and that he might actually love.
There you go. We're all about
Yeah.
opening minds and hearts and wallets.
That's right. Yeah, Vago is a really fantastic mezcal. For those of you who enjoy mezcal, please join us when we do that one someday down the line. Really great stuff. I'm a big mezcal guy, and you know, I spend a lot of time with the families down in Oaxaca. Really special brands. Some great juice.
Awesome. I think that's it. If anybody has any other questions, but other than that, we'll let you get back to it. Well, thank you so much for spending the evening with us. That was really awesome, educational. We really enjoyed that. And then, look, if you're willing to come back and do another, we're more than happy to have you.
Absolutely. Happy to come back. This is my passion, you guys. You've got my contact information. Literally anytime, you know, anytime you have a question, I can share my phone number with you all as well. But anytime you have a question, thought, anything, you could be in a liquor store and want to know what tequila you should buy. Shoot me a text with a picture and say, hey, what should I get? I'm happy to help you out. So thank you for the support. Thank you for listening to me ramble on tonight. I appreciate it, and enjoy your agave journey, you guys.
Awesome.
Thanks so much, Chris. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. Really cool.
Take care, all.
Thank you, guys.
You.
Bye.
Take care now.